think I didn't do anything wrong, just made the best of a bad marriage. So I don't understand why my husband handed me those divorce papers in front of my whole family. All I did was let someone who actually cared about me stay for the night, but now everyone's acting like I'm the villain. If he wants to make this a legal battle, fine, but he shouldn't be surprised by how things turned out. Before we dive deeper into the story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. The rain hammered against our suburban windows like angry fists, and I could feel the familiar chill of another evening alone with Martin. He sat hunched over his laptop in the living room, fingers clicking away at some IT project while thunder rolled overhead. 6 years of marriage, and this was what we'd become. Two strangers sharing a house, going through the motions. My phone buzzed. Jonas again. "Storm's getting worse. You okay over there?" I smiled despite myself. At least someone cared enough to check on me. Jonas Mercer from HR had been such a blessing these past few months. Finally, someone who listened when I talked about my problems, who understood how lonely I felt in this marriage. "Martin's just ignoring me as usual," I texted back. "I swear he cares more about his computers than his own wife." "You deserve so much better, Isolda. Want me to come over? I hate thinking of you alone during this storm." My heart fluttered. When was the last time Martin had shown that kind of concern? I glanced at my husband, still absorbed in his screen, and felt that familiar resentment bubble up. "Martin," I called out, "Jonas is worried about the storm. He might stop by to check on us." Martin's head snapped up, his dark eyes narrowing. "Jonas? Your co-worker? Why would he need to come here?" "Because he's a friend who actually cares about my well-being," I shot back. "Is that such a foreign concept to you?" "Isolda, it's almost 10 p.m. and there's a storm warning. Why would a male co-worker need to—" "There you go again." I stood up, my voice rising. "You're so paranoid and controlling. Jonas is just being nice, something you wouldn't understand." Martin closed his laptop and walked over, his expression troubled. "I'm not trying to control you. I just think it's inappropriate for him to come over this late, especially when—" "When what?" "When my own husband can't be bothered to have a conversation with me, when you spend every evening glued to that screen." "That's not fair, Isolda. I work hard to provide for this family, and lately I've been what? Having friends? God forbid I have someone in my life who actually wants to talk to me." The thunder crashed again, and I saw 6-year-old Ella peek around the corner, her little face worried. My heart clenched. I hated when she saw us fight. My phone buzzed again. "On my way. You shouldn't have to deal with this alone." "Jonas is coming over," I announced defiantly. "And if you can't handle me having a friend who cares about me, then maybe you should think about what kind of husband you've been." Martin's face went pale. "Isolda, please. Can we just talk about this? I know I've been distant lately, but work has been crazy and I thought—" "You thought what? That I'd just sit here forever, waiting for you to remember I exist?" I was on a roll now, all my months of frustration pouring out. "Jonas appreciates me. He listens when I talk. He makes me feel like I matter." "You do matter. You're my wife, the mother of my daughter." "Then act like it," I screamed. "Stop treating me like some roommate you're stuck with." The doorbell rang, and I felt a surge of vindication. Martin looked stricken, his shoulders sagging. "Don't answer that," he said quietly. "Please, Isolda. Let's just talk, you and me. Send him home." But I was already walking to the door, my phone lighting up with supportive messages from my mother and sister. Mom had been telling me for months that I deserved better, that Martin was emotionally unavailable. Melissa always said I was too good for him. "If you can't trust me to have friends," I said, my hand on the doorknob, "then maybe you should leave. Go to your mother's house if you're so uncomfortable with me having someone who actually cares." I opened the door to find Jonas standing there, soaked from the rain but smiling warmly. He was everything Martin wasn't: charming, attentive, interested in my thoughts and feelings. "Hey," he said softly, stepping inside. I brought some tea. Thought you might need some comfort during the storm. Behind me, I heard Martin's sharp intake of breath. When I turned, he was staring at us with a look I'd never seen before. Not just hurt, but something deeper. Betrayal, maybe. "This is what you want?" Martin asked, his voice barely audible over the thunder. "Him here in our home, while our daughter sleeps upstairs." "I want someone who cares about me," I said firmly. "If that threatens you, then maybe you should think about why." Martin stood there for a long moment, rain dripping from his hair, looking between Jonas and me. Then he grabbed his keys and jacket. "Fine," he said quietly. "I'll go to my mother's. But Isolda, think about what you're doing. Really think about it." The door slammed behind him, and I felt a mixture of triumph and relief. Finally, I could breathe. Finally, someone who understood me was here. Jonas pulled me into a gentle hug. "You did the right thing," he murmured. "You can't let him control who you're friends with." As I made tea in the kitchen, I ignored the nagging voice in my head that whispered I might have gone too far. Martin was just being his usual jealous, controlling self. I deserved happiness, didn't I? I deserved to feel appreciated. My phone buzzed with a text from Doris, Martin's mother. "He's here, soaked and heartbroken. What have you done, Isolda?" I deleted the message. She'd always taken his side anyway. I woke up the next morning feeling lighter than I had in months. Jonas had left around midnight after we'd talked for hours about everything. My dreams, my frustrations, how underappreciated I felt. He was such a good listener, so different from Martin's distracted grunts and half-hearted responses. Ella wandered into the kitchen as I was making coffee, her stuffed rabbit dragging behind her. "Where's Daddy?" she asked, climbing onto her usual chair. "Daddy just needed a break, sweetheart," I said, ruffling her hair. "Sometimes grown-ups need space to think." She nodded solemnly, though I could see the confusion in her eyes. I felt a pang of guilt but pushed it down. This wasn't my fault. Martin was the one who'd chosen to leave instead of trusting me. My phone was already buzzing with messages. Mom had called twice, and Melissa had sent a string of supportive texts. "You're so brave for standing up for yourself," Melissa had written. "Martin needs to learn he can't treat you like property." "Proud of you for not backing down," Mum had added. "A woman needs friends, and if he can't handle that, it's his problem." Their support felt validating, but I noticed some missed calls from Philip, Martin's brother. I decided to ignore those. He'd just try to mediate like he always did. Around noon, I made a decision. If people were going to talk anyway, I might as well control the narrative. I took a photo of the teacups Jonas and I had used the night before, still sitting on the coffee table, and posted it to social media with the caption, "Sometimes you need a friend who actually listens. Grateful for genuine connections during stormy times." Within minutes, the comments started pouring in. Mom was first. "You deserve all the friendship and support in the world, honey." Then Melissa, "Some people are just jealous of authentic relationships. Keep being you." But I also noticed some uncomfortable reactions. Martin's co-workers, some of our neighbors, even Philip's wife had liked the post, then quickly unliked it. My phone rang. "Doris." "Isolda, what is this post supposed to mean?" Her voice was ice cold. "It means I'm grateful for friends who care about me," I said defensively. "Friends? Is that what you call having another man in your house overnight while you throw your husband out in a storm?" "I didn't throw him out. He chose to leave because he couldn't handle me having a friend." "A friend?" Doris's laugh was bitter. "Isolda, do you hear yourself? Martin came here devastated last night. He said you've been distant for months, secretive about your phone, coming home late." "That's ridiculous. I work in HR, Doris. Sometimes I have to stay late for meetings." "Meetings with Jonas?" The question hung in the air. I felt my cheeks burn. "My work relationships are none of Martin's business, or yours." "Your marriage is my business when my son is sitting in my living room wondering where he went wrong, when my granddaughter is asking why Daddy looks so sad." I hung up, my hands shaking. Why was everyone making this about me? I wasn't the one who'd been emotionally unavailable for months. I wasn't the one who'd chosen work over family time after time. Ella came running into the kitchen, holding her tablet. "Mommy, look, I made Daddy a picture." She showed me a drawing of our family, stick figures holding hands in front of our house. But in the picture, Daddy was standing far away from Mommy and Ella, with what looked like tears on his face. That's very nice, sweetheart," I managed. "Can we send it to him? I miss him." Before I could answer, I caught a glimpse of movement outside the window. Martin's car was parked across the street, and I could see him sitting behind the wheel, looking at our house. My stomach dropped when I realized Jonas's car was still in our driveway. He'd left it overnight because of the storm and taken an Uber home. As I watched, Martin lifted his phone and seemed to take a picture. Then he drove away. My hands were trembling as I called Jonas. "Hey, beautiful," he answered. "How are you feeling this morning?" "Martin's taking pictures of your car in my driveway," I whispered. There was a pause. "Okay, that's a little creepy. Maybe I should come get it later when he's not around." "You think he's going to cause trouble?" "I don't know, Isolda. Maybe we should cool it for a few days, let things settle down." "Cool it?" My heart sank. "But Jonas, you said last night that—" "I know what I said, and I meant it, but I also don't want to make things harder for you, or for me at work." After he hung up, I sat in my kitchen feeling more alone than ever. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. I was supposed to feel empowered, supported, free. Instead, I felt like everyone was turning against me for no reason. Ella tugged on my sleeve. "Mommy, can we call Daddy now?" I looked down at her hopeful face, then at her drawing of our broken family, and felt something crack inside my chest, but I pushed the feeling away. I'd done nothing wrong. Martin was the one who'd chosen to leave. Martin was the one who couldn't trust his own wife. "Maybe later, sweetheart," I said, though I had no intention of calling him. Outside, I noticed Mrs. Henderson from next door, watching our house through her window. Great. Now the whole neighborhood would be talking. I grabbed my phone and scrolled through the comments on my post again, focusing on the supportive ones from Mom and Melissa. They understood. They knew I deserved better. But as I looked at Ella's drawing again, I couldn't shake the image of those stick-figure tears on Daddy's face. Sunday lunch at Philip and Sarah's house was supposed to be a neutral ground, a chance for both families to come together and work things out. I'd agreed to come because I wanted everyone to see that I was the reasonable one, the one willing to communicate and move forward. I arrived with Ella and Mom, who'd driven in specifically to support me. Melissa was already there, giving me encouraging smiles from across the room. On the other side sat Martin with Doris and Philip, looking like they were planning some kind of intervention. "Thank you all for coming," Philip said, ever the peacemaker. "I think we can work through this if we all just talk openly and honestly." I straightened in my chair. Perfect. I'd been waiting for this chance to explain how unreasonable Martin had been. "I want everyone to understand," I began, "that I've done nothing wrong. All I did was maintain a friendship with a co-worker, and Martin couldn't handle it. He's been increasingly controlling and paranoid about my relationships." Martin's head snapped up. "Controlling? Isolda, I asked you not to have another man over to our house at night. How is that controlling?" "See?" I gestured to the table. "This is exactly what I'm talking about. He thinks he can dictate who I'm friends with, who I can see, who I can talk to." Mom nodded vigorously. "A woman has the right to have friends, Martin. Isolda's been lonely in that marriage for years." "Lonely?" Martin's voice cracked slightly. "I've been working 60-hour weeks to pay for our house, our daughter's school, everything we need. When exactly was I supposed to—" "That's just an excuse," I interrupted. "Jonas works full-time too, but he still finds time to be emotionally available. He listens when I talk. He cares about my feelings." "Jonas," Doris said sharply, "is not your husband. Martin is. And you had that man in your house overnight while you threw your husband out in a storm." "I didn't throw him out. He chose to leave because he couldn't handle me having a friend who actually cares about me. Melissa jumped in. Exactly. Isolda deserves to have people in her life who appreciate her. If Martin felt threatened by that, maybe he should examine his own behavior. I felt a surge of gratitude for my family's support. Finally, people who understood. But then Philip spoke up. Isolda, I have to ask, is Jonas just a friend? The question hung in the air. I felt everyone's eyes on me. Of course he's just a friend. The fact that everyone is assuming otherwise just proves how toxic this whole situation has become. A woman can't even have a male friend without everyone assuming the worst. But you've been texting him constantly, Martin said quietly. Coming home late from work meetings, hiding your phone when I'm around. I hide my phone because you've become obsessive about checking up on me. You don't trust me, and that's not my problem, it's yours. Martin's not obsessive, Doris said firmly. He's concerned about his marriage. Any husband would be. Any controlling husband, maybe, Mum shot back. Isolda has been trying to save this marriage for years, but Martin's been emotionally absent. She deserves better. I felt vindicated hearing Mum defend me, but I noticed Ella had gone very quiet in her chair, picking at her food. Sarah, Philip's wife, kept glancing between Martin and me with concern. Look, I said, standing up to address the whole table. I'm sorry if my having friends makes people uncomfortable, but I won't apologize for seeking emotional support when my own husband can't provide it. Jonas has been there for me in ways Martin never was. There for you how? Philip asked gently. He listens. He validates my feelings. He makes me feel valued and appreciated. When was the last time Martin did any of that? Martin was staring at his plate, his jaw clenched. I've tried to talk to you, Isolda. Every time I try, you shut me down or turn it into an argument about how I'm not good enough. Because you're not. The words flew out before I could stop them. You're emotionally unavailable, Martin. You care more about your computers than your own family. Jonas sees that. He understands what I'm going through. The silence that followed was deafening. Even Mom looked uncomfortable now. Then Martin stood up slowly, reaching into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a manila folder and set it gently on the table. Since we're talking about understanding and emotional support, he said quietly, I think everyone should see what kind of friendship we're really discussing. My blood turned to ice. Martin, don't... But he was already opening the folder, spreading out printed pages, text message screenshots, lots of them. I can't stop thinking about last night, he read aloud. Martin doesn't appreciate what he has. I wish I could just run away with you. Those are taken out of context. I lunged for the papers, but Philip gently held me back. He's working late again. Want to come over? Martin continued, his voice getting stronger. I hate sleeping alone. You make me feel so alive. The room was completely silent now, except for Martin's voice reading my most private conversations. Conversations that, laid out like this, sounded much worse than they'd felt when I was writing them. Can't wait until we don't have to sneak around anymore, he finished. You're everything he's not. I looked around the table. Mom's mouth was hanging open. Melissa was staring at me like she'd never seen me before. Doris looked furious, but also sad. Philip was shaking his head. Those messages, they don't mean what you think, I said desperately. Jonas and I never... We're just friends. I was venting about my marriage and planning when he could come over while I was at work. Martin's voice was steady now, almost calm. And telling him you loved him? I never said I loved him. Martin flipped to another page. I think I'm falling in love with you. Is that crazy? The words hung in the air like a death sentence. I remembered writing that text, remembered the thrill I'd felt hitting send, but seeing it here, in front of our families, with Ella sitting right there. Mommy? Ella's small voice cut through the tension. Why is everyone upset? I wanted to disappear. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. I was supposed to be the victim here, the misunderstood wife seeking friendship and support. Ella, sweetheart, Martin said gently, why don't you go play in Uncle Philip's backyard for a few minutes? After she left, the silence returned. I could feel everyone's eyes on me, but I couldn't meet any of their gazes. Isolda, Philip said carefully, is there anything you want to say? I looked around the table one more time, at Mum's shocked face, at Melissa's disappointment, at Doris's anger, at Martin's quiet devastation. You had no right to read my private messages, I said finally. Those conversations were taken out of context. You don't understand what I've been going through. Martin gathered up the papers and put them back in the folder. I understand perfectly, he said. I understand that while I was working to support our family, you were planning to replace me. I understand that you've been lying to me for months, and I understand that you're more upset about being caught than about what you've done. He stood up, tucking the folder under his arm. I'll be in touch through my lawyer, he said quietly. Then he walked out, leaving me alone with the wreckage of everything I'd thought I could control. Monday morning at the office felt like walking into a minefield. Word had somehow spread about the Sunday dinner disaster, and I could feel eyes on me everywhere I went. Jonas was conspicuously absent from his usual spot by the coffee machine, and when I finally found him in his cubicle, he barely looked up. We need to talk, I whispered. He glanced around nervously. Isolda, maybe we should keep things professional for a while. People are starting to notice and... Starting to notice what? That we're friends? That we're... whatever this is. He finally looked at me, and I saw something I'd never seen before in his eyes. Doubt. Look, I heard about what happened with your husband yesterday. Maybe we moved too fast. My heart sank. Jonas, you said you cared about me. You said Martin didn't deserve me. I know what I said, but I also have a career to think about. And honestly, this is getting complicated in ways I didn't expect. I stared at him, feeling the ground shift beneath my feet. So you're just going to abandon me? When I need you most? I'm not abandoning you. I'm just saying we should be careful, let things cool down. Before I could respond, my supervisor, Janet, appeared at my cubicle. Isolda, can I see you in my office? My stomach dropped as I followed her down the hall. Janet closed the door and gestured for me to sit. I've received some concerning reports about workplace relationships, she began carefully. I wanted to give you a chance to address them directly. What kind of reports? Reports that you've been engaging in inappropriate behavior with Jonas Mercer, staying late together, personal conversations during work hours, and now I understand there's been some kind of domestic situation involving him. I felt my cheeks burn. Jonas and I are friends. If people are making assumptions based on that friendship, it says more about them than about us. Isolda, I need you to be completely honest with me. Is there anything inappropriate happening between you and Jonas? The question hung in the air. I thought about the text messages Martin had read aloud, about Jonas staying over during the storm, about the way my heart raced whenever I saw him. No, I said firmly. We're friends, close friends. I've been having problems in my marriage, and Jonas has been supportive. If people want to read more into that, I can't control their assumptions. Janet studied my face for a long moment. I'm going to document this conversation, and I'm strongly advising you to maintain appropriate boundaries with all co-workers going forward. We can't have the appearance of impropriety affecting our workplace environment. As I walked back to my desk, I felt like everyone was watching me. Jonas had disappeared entirely, probably hiding in the break room or bathroom. My phone buzzed with a text from Melissa. Mom told me about the messages. Isolda, what were you thinking? Even my own sister was turning against me now. I tried to focus on work, but my mind kept racing. This wasn't fair. I wasn't the villain here. I was a lonely woman who'd found comfort in a friendship, and everyone was acting like I'd committed some terrible crime. My phone buzzed again. This time it was an email from an address I didn't recognize. Mrs. Vane, this is attorney Rebecca Chen representing your husband Martin Vane in matrimonial matters. Please provide the following financial documents within 48 hours. The email went on to list bank statements, credit card records, employment information, and other documents I didn't even understand. At the bottom was a line that made my blood run cold. Please be advised that Mr. Vane will be filing for emergency custody of the minor child pending resolution of this matter. Emergency custody? He was trying to take Ella away from me? I called Mom immediately. He can't do this, can he? I asked as soon as she answered. He can't just take Ella. Slow down, honey. What's happening? I read her the email, my voice shaking. Mom, he's trying to paint me as some kind of unfit mother just because I had a friend over to the house. Oh, sweetheart. Mom's voice was gentler than it had been in days. Maybe you should get your own lawyer. I shouldn't need a lawyer. I haven't done anything wrong. But even as I said it, I remembered the text messages, the look on Ella's face when she'd asked where Daddy was, the way Jonas had distanced himself the moment things got complicated. That evening, I sat in my empty house, staring at the legal email on my phone. Ella was at Doris's house. Martin had picked her up from school, claiming it was his scheduled time, though we'd never had a formal schedule before. I tried calling Jonas, but it went straight to voicemail. I tried texting him, but he didn't respond. The man who'd told me I deserved better, who'd held me during the storm and promised to be there for me, had vanished the moment his own comfort was threatened. My phone rang. Philip. Isolda, I think we should talk. If you're calling to lecture me about those messages, I'm calling because I'm worried about you and about Ella. This situation is spiraling out of control. I'm not the one who made it spiral. Martin's the one who violated my privacy and aired our personal business in front of everyone. Isolda, listen to yourself. You're blaming everyone except yourself. Martin didn't create those text messages. He didn't force you to have another man over to your house. He didn't make you lie about your relationship with Jonas. I didn't lie. Yes, you did. We all heard those messages yesterday. Whatever you want to call it, it wasn't just friendship. I hung up on him too, but his words echoed in my head as I sat alone in the house that suddenly felt too big and too quiet. My phone buzzed one more time. A text from Martin. Ella's staying with my mother tonight. She needs stability while we figure this out. Please don't contact her directly until we can establish proper boundaries. Boundaries. Everyone kept talking about boundaries. But what about my boundaries? What about my right to have friends, to seek emotional support when my own husband couldn't provide it? I poured myself a large glass of wine and scrolled through my phone, looking for someone, anyone, who might understand my side of this. But Jonas wasn't responding. Mom was being distant since hearing the messages, and Melissa seemed to be questioning everything she'd supported before. As I sat there in the growing darkness, I tried to figure out how everything had gone so wrong so quickly. Just a few days ago, I'd felt justified, supported, right. Now I felt like everyone was conspiring against me, but I wasn't going to give up without a fight. If Martin wanted to make this a legal battle, fine. I'd show everyone that I was the real victim here. The family mediation office felt like a courtroom, all sterile lighting and uncomfortable chairs. I sat across from Martin, who looked different somehow, more composed, more confident than I'd seen him in months. His lawyer, Rebecca Chen, was a sharp-eyed woman who kept glancing at a thick folder of documents. My own lawyer, David Morrison, had been hastily hired after a frantic Google search. He seemed competent enough, but I could tell he was uncomfortable with some aspects of my case. Let's begin with the custody arrangement, the mediator, Mrs. Patterson, said. Mr. Vane, you're requesting primary custody of Ella. Can you explain your reasoning? Rebecca Chen opened her folder. Your Honor, we have substantial evidence that Mrs. Vane has created an unstable environment for the child. She engaged in an extramarital affair, brought her paramour into the family home overnight, and has shown a pattern of deceptive and manipulative behavior. That's completely unfair, I burst out. I never had an affair. Jonas is a friend who is helping me through a difficult time in my marriage. Mrs. Patterson looked at me calmly. Mrs. Vane, you'll have your chance to respond. Mr. Vane, please present your evidence. What followed was the most humiliating hour of my life. Rebecca Chen methodically laid out a case that made me look like a calculating adulteress. The text messages were just the beginning. Exhibit A, GPS records from Mrs. Vane's phone showing frequent visits to Mr. Mercer's apartment during work hours. Those were lunch meetings, I protested. Lunch meetings that lasted 3 hours? Rebecca continued. Exhibit B, credit card records showing hotel charges on days when Mrs. Vane claimed to be working late. My lawyer leaned over and whispered, "Why didn't you tell me about the hotels?" "They were for work conferences," I whispered back, though even I knew how weak that sounded. Exhibit C, testimony from neighbors documenting Mr. Mercer's car in the driveway on multiple occasions when Mr. Vane was traveling for work. "He was helping me with household repairs," I said, but my voice sounded hollow even to me. Exhibit D, social media posts that appear designed to provoke and humiliate Mr. Vane, including the photo posted the morning after the storm incident. I remembered that post, the teacups, the caption about genuine connections. At the time, it had felt empowering. Now, it looked petty and cruel. Exhibit E, recorded conversation between Mrs. Vane and her sister, in which she admits to being in love with Mr. Mercer. My blood turned to ice. "You recorded me?" Martin spoke for the first time. "Melissa was worried about you. She called to try to understand what was happening, and she recorded the conversation because she was concerned about Ella's well-being. Even my own sister had turned against me. I felt like I was drowning. Finally, Rebecca said, we have affidavits from multiple family members documenting Mrs. Vane's pattern of manipulation, gaslighting, and blame-shifting. She has consistently refused to take responsibility for her actions and has attempted to portray herself as the victim of her husband's controlling behavior. Mrs. Patterson turned to my lawyer. "Mr. Morrison, how does your client respond to these allegations?" David cleared his throat. "Your Honor, Mrs. Vane maintains that she never engaged in physical adultery. While she acknowledges forming a close friendship with Mr. Mercer, she contends that her husband's emotional unavailability drove her to seek support elsewhere. She's willing to end the friendship and work on the marriage if Mr. Vane is willing to attend counseling." I stared at him. That wasn't what I'd told him to say. I told him to argue that Martin was controlling and that I had every right to have friends. "Mrs. Vane," the mediator said, "is that an accurate representation of your position?" I looked around the room. Martin was watching me with an expression I couldn't read. His mother sat behind him, her face set in stone. Philip was there too, looking sad but determined. I started, then stopped. What was I supposed to say? That I wasn't sorry? That I'd do it all again? That Jonas was worth destroying my marriage over? Except Jonas wasn't even here. Jonas had made it clear he wanted nothing to do with this mess. He'd gotten what he wanted, attention, excitement, the thrill of the chase, and then disappeared when things got complicated. "Mrs. Vane?" the mediator prompted. "I never meant for any of this to happen," I said finally. "I was lonely. I felt neglected. Jonas made me feel special, and I made some poor choices." "Are you willing to end the relationship with Mr. Mercer?" The question hung in the air. 6 months ago, I would have said no. 6 weeks ago, I would have said no. But sitting here, looking at the evidence of my own deception laid out like a roadmap to destruction, I realized that the relationship had already ended. Jonas had abandoned me the moment I needed him most. "Yes," I whispered. "And are you willing to attend marriage counseling?" I looked at Martin. He was watching me with something that might have been hope, but also wariness, as if he was waiting for me to disappoint him again. "Martin," I said, "do you even want to try, after everything?" He was quiet for a long moment. "I wanted to try 6 months ago. I wanted to try when I first noticed you pulling away." I wanted to try the night of the storm when I begged you to talk to me instead of letting Jonas come over. His words hit me like a physical blow. I remembered that night, remembered the look on his face when he'd asked me not to open the door. I'd been so focused on my own feelings, my own sense of righteousness, that I'd ignored his pain entirely. But now, I asked, now I don't know if I can trust you, and Ella needs stability. She needs to know that the adults in her life aren't going to keep hurting each other. Mrs. Patterson reviewed her notes. Based on the evidence presented, I'm recommending that Mr. Vane be granted primary custody, with Mrs. Vane receiving supervised visitation until she completes a course of individual therapy and demonstrates consistent, appropriate behavior. Supervised visitation? I stood up so quickly my chair fell over. She's my daughter. She's a child who's been traumatized by her parents' conflict, Mrs. Patterson said firmly. The court's primary concern is her well-being, not your parental rights. As we left the mediation office, I felt like I was walking through a nightmare. Everything I'd thought I was fighting for, my independence, my right to happiness, my freedom from Martin's supposed control, had crumbled into dust. Martin caught up with me in the parking lot. Isolda, he said quietly, it doesn't have to be this way. What do you mean? I mean, you could still fight for our marriage, for our family, but you'd have to really fight. You'd have to admit what you did wrong and work to fix it. Not just say you're sorry, but actually change. I looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time in months. He looked tired, older, but also somehow stronger than before, like he'd found something in himself that I'd never seen. Would you be willing to try? I asked. Even after everything? I don't know, he said honestly, but I'd be willing to find out. For Ella's sake, if nothing else. As I drove home to my empty house, I thought about his words, for Ella's sake. When was the last time I'd made a decision based on what was best for my daughter, rather than what felt good for me? The answer was uncomfortable. I couldn't remember. 3 months later, I sat in the courthouse waiting room, watching Martin play quietly with Ella in the corner. She looked happy, settled, more at peace than I'd seen her in months. It hurt to admit, but the stability of living primarily with Martin and Doris had been good for her. My therapy sessions with Dr. Williams had been brutal. Week after week, she'd forced me to examine my choices, my motivations, my patterns of blame and self-justification. Slowly, painfully, I'd begun to see the truth about what I'd done, not just to Martin, but to Ella, to myself. Jonas had transferred to another company within a month of the mediation. He'd never responded to any of my attempts to contact him, never acknowledged the role he'd played in the destruction of my marriage. I'd finally stopped trying to reach him, recognizing that whatever I'd thought we had was an illusion built on my own loneliness and his opportunism. Mrs. Vane, the clerk called my name. Judge Harrison is ready for you. This was it, the final custody hearing. Martin's lawyer had made it clear that he was still seeking primary custody, though they were no longer requesting supervised visitation for me. My own behavior over the past 3 months, my commitment to therapy, and my genuine efforts to rebuild my relationship with Ella had earned me that much. Judge Harrison was a stern-faced woman in her 60s who'd clearly seen every variation of family dysfunction. She reviewed the case file with the weary efficiency of someone who'd presided over too many broken marriages. I've reviewed the mediation report, the custody evaluation, and both parties' compliance with the court's recommendations, she began. Mrs. Vane, Dr. Williams reports that you've made significant progress in therapy and have demonstrated genuine insight into the behaviors that led to this situation. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. However, the court's primary concern remains the best interests of the child. Ella has been thriving in her current arrangement, and stability is crucial during this transition period. My heart sank. I knew what was coming. Therefore, the court awards primary physical custody to Mr. Vane, with Mrs. Vane receiving alternating weekends and 1 evening per week. Both parents will share legal custody, and all major decisions regarding Ella's welfare must be made jointly. It wasn't what I'd hoped for, but it was better than I'd feared, and honestly, it was probably what I deserved. Additionally, the judge continued, the court strongly recommends that both parties continue with counselling, individual therapy for Mrs. Vane, and co-parenting counselling for both parties. After the hearing, Martin and I found ourselves alone in the hallway while Ella visited the bathroom with Doris. "I'm sorry," I said quietly. "I know I've said it before, but I need to say it again. I'm sorry for what I did to you, to Ella, to our family. I'm sorry it took losing everything for me to see how destructive my behaviour was." Martin studied my face. "Are you really? Or are you sorry you got caught?" It was a fair question. 3 months ago, I would have been indignant at the implication. Now, I forced myself to really consider it. "Both, probably," I admitted. "I am sorry I got caught, because getting caught meant facing consequences I wasn't ready for. But I'm also genuinely sorry for the pain I caused. Dr. Williams has helped me understand that what I did was a form of emotional abuse. The gaslighting, the blame shifting, the way I made you feel crazy for noticing obvious red flags." Something shifted in Martin's expression. "That's the first time you've ever acknowledged that." "I know. I was so focused on justifying my actions that I couldn't see how they affected anyone else. I convinced myself that I was the victim, that you were controlling, that I deserved whatever happiness I could find. But the truth is, I was selfish. I wanted the security of marriage and the excitement of an affair, and I was willing to lie and manipulate to have both." Ella came running back down the hall, her little hand slipping into mine. "Mummy, are you coming to dinner with us?" I looked at Martin, who shrugged. "It's fine with me if you want to." As we walked out of the courthouse together, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months, a tiny spark of hope. Not hope that Martin and I would reconcile. That bridge had been thoroughly burned, but hope that we might eventually build something new, not as husband and wife, but as co-parents who could put Ella's needs first. "Martin," I said as we reached the parking lot, "I know I don't have the right to ask this, but do you think you'll ever be able to forgive me?" He was quiet for a long moment, watching Ella skip ahead of us. "I don't know," he said finally, "but I think I might eventually be able to understand why you did what you did, and maybe that's enough for now." 6 months later, I moved into a small apartment across town. It wasn't the life I'd planned, but it was honest in a way my marriage never was. I continued therapy, focused on rebuilding my relationship with Ella, and slowly began to understand what it meant to take responsibility for my choices. I never heard from Jonas again, and I was grateful for that. Whatever I'd thought I'd found with him was built on deception and fantasy. The real work, the hard work of becoming someone worthy of love and trust, could only be done alone. Sometimes, late at night, I wondered what would have happened if I'd made different choices, if I'd talked to Martin about my loneliness instead of seeking comfort elsewhere, if I'd suggested marriage counselling instead of emotional affairs, if I'd put my daughter's stability ahead of my own desires for excitement and validation. But those were questions without answers. All I could do was move forward, try to be better, and hope that someday Ella would understand that people can change, even when that change comes at the cost of everything they thought they wanted. The divorce papers arrived on a Tuesday, signed and sealed and final. I held them for a long time, thinking about the woman who'd thrown her husband out in a storm and invited her lover inside. That woman had been so certain she was right, so convinced she was the victim of an unfair marriage. Now I knew better. Now I understood that the real storm had been inside me all along, a hurricane of selfishness and self-deception that had destroyed everything in its path. But storms, eventually, do pass, and in the calm that follows, if you're lucky and if you work hard enough, you might just find a way to rebuild something better from the wreckage.